and welcome. I'm Lee Camp, joined by the always amazing Eleanor Goldfield, and we had a genocidal maniac speak to Congress yesterday, and it was just moving. It was touching. I laughed. I cried. Just so great to see one of the largest, most prolific genocidists, if that's a word.
I think it's genocider.
Genociderists.
I think genocidists is all the people who are clapping.
Yeah,
they're into the genocide. So
they're the enthusiasts of genocide. Okay,
right.
Enthusiast. Got it. So he spoke to Congress. Netanyahu spoke to Congress, and as most of you know, and there were over 50 standing ovations, and this person has done the important work of putting the video of the standing ovations of Netanyahu juxtaposed to the Canadian Parliament giving a standing ovation to a literal Nazi, like from World War II Nazi, not present day youngin Nazi. And
right, like not just an appreciator of the Nazis.
A Nazist?
Yeah.
Judging by your grammar.
A Nazi enthusiast?
Nazi enthusiast. No, like literal Nazi. And the Canadian Parliament did that just a few months or a year ago. And here is Netanyahu being given over 50 standing ovations by our genocidal empire, the U.S. empire. It did stand to give a really nice kind of graphic imagery to what it is the U.S. empire stands for. And here's another point someone made. The average amount of standing ovations during Kim Jong-un's speeches in North Korea is about one standing ovation per 4 minutes of speaking. Benjamin Netanyahu received 400% more standing ovations in the United States than Kim Jong-un inside what we are all told is a dictatorship where they have to stand and applaud. So,
I mean, standing ovations, I feel like standing ovations are getting a bad rap here. Standing ovations.
I don't know if that's what you should take away from this.
Well, with the whole like Kim Jong-un thing, it's like when you're mandated to do a standing ovation, it's like I think the point here is that clapping, whether you're sitting or standing, for a genocider is just not good.
It just speaks to the enthusiasm.
Right. I get that. But it's like, you shouldn't clap at all, whether you're on your ass or on your feet.
You shouldn't really be there. He shouldn't be there.
He shouldn't be there, but yeah.
None of them should be there. It should have been an empty room. That I might have respected. This is another video. I know for those of you listening to the podcast, I apologize, but a video someone has put together images of the sheer destruction in Gaza, the endless number of bombs juxtaposed with Congress applauding. And again, important graphic imagery of just how bloodthirsty and disgusting this government is. I actually think having Netanyahu here and having all these standing ovations and having all but 80 members of Congress show up to give those standing ovations, I think it kind of showed what our government really does stand for, like in a really pure and graphic way.
Indeed, it does. And I just want to, somebody was asking about whether they had seat fillers. They did.
Really?
Yeah. Because
how do you get that job?
I think like 130 members didn't show up.
I thought it was 80.
And they didn't want, I think it was more than 80, but
okay.
Anyway, so they didn't show up and they wanted to make sure that the place looked packed. And so people might have seen, perhaps the most famous seat filler was Elon Musk, but there were like people who were just like brought in who have nothing to do with Congress to make it look
full.
Yeah. And that's not just like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, it would have looked empty. Like, no, there are plenty of our politicians who showed up and were like, fuck yeah, I want to see this. This is great. So I'm not trying to give anybody a pass, but like they super wanted to make sure that it looked like a full house, like, like Led Zeppelin at Madison Square Garden level,
Yeah, totally disgusting, repulsive, but I was heartened by the amazing and creative protests that went on outside of the Capitol buildings, outside of Congress. And you were down there in D.C. yesterday and got to see all of this firsthand.
Yes. And before we get into that, I just wanted to share, because you were talking about like what how this speaks to
sorry
what
to
we stand
transition early.
But Tamara Nasser, who works at the Electronic Intifada, the associate editor of the Electronic Intifada, which is a great outlet. Y'all should definitely check it out. She posted yesterday about the, she had originally posted like applauding the butcher of 16,000 children. It's probably more than that. But she writes, "This is not an aberration, and calling it a, quote, dark day in American history is like spotting a single red letter in a book printed in blood. This is the legacy of the United States of America." And I think it's really important to highlight that, because I feel like a lot of times you have, like if anybody's ever been to like, an anti-ICE or anti-border patrol protest, you'll see people holding these signs like, being anti-immigrant is anti-American. And I'm like, so you've just never read history, I guess,
Right.
because that's very American. And like, we end up whitewashing history and placing ourselves in like a vacuum of history when we don't recognize that this is just a continuation of US policy going back since its founding.
Yep.
Because of genocide. So it's like to suggest that this is in a way, like she says, an aberration, is to give the US a pass on its history, both domestically and outside of the US. So I think it's important to contextualize it that way. And that, again, we shouldn't be surprised, but we should always remain disgusted.
Yeah, this is not an exception. This is not new. It's just that the level of genocide that they're trying to pass off as acceptable, the speed of it, the percentage of children killed during it, is newer to these recent decades. I'm not going to say this is the first time the U.S. has committed genocide at this level, but I just mean in terms of recent decades and the speed and everything. But in terms of actual U.S. Facilitating, funding, arming, and literally perpetrating the murder of children, the murder of innocent people, that is nothing new. That is nothing the United States has been clean of over these past many years.
And again, like, I think another point that somebody else made was that don't forget that Congress knows exactly what is going on. They're not uneducated. I recently spoke to Mohammed Abu Hashem, who was with the Air Force. He's a Palestinian American and was with the Air Force for 22 years. And then he left in October of last year after losing 6 family members in Gaza to Israel's genocide. And he was talking to me about intelligence that is not like top secret. It's not classified, that is being shared around government agencies about what's going on in Gaza. Like, people know this is not some kind of top secret. I mean, we know, right? We know. And so it's not like these members of Congress are uneducated about what's going on. They know, they've seen the reports. They've probably seen pictures of the dead bodies in the streets and things like that. They're not uneducated about what's going on. They know about the death camps and the families that have been completely struck from the registers. They know all of the gruesome details, and they chose to be there. So again, like, nobody can claim afterwards or, in 10 years or whatever, that they didn't know. It's like if you were in Nazi Germany and you worked at the Reichstag and you were like, I had no idea what we were putting these people on trains for. I thought it was a day trip.
And some people did try that.
Of course. Of course. But it's not going to work. And I think especially now, because this is the first genocide in history that's been live streamed. And so there's no way that these people don't know what's going on. Right. And they chose to be there. And if that doesn't tell you everything that you need to know about the United States government, I can't help you.
Thank you, Travis, for becoming a member on YouTube. Everybody should check that out if you get a second. And thank you all for the super chats. Thank you for the thumbs up, and it all makes a difference with the algorithm and keeping this show going and everything. I want to move on to the protests, which were they were large, they were enthusiastic, even in the heat, and they were creative. And so there's just a lot to talk about these awesome protests. And the right wing, by the way, meaning Fox News and many other outlets, are jumping on they'll show the video of of a flag being burned, and they'll go, these terribly violent protests.
Which, by the way,
I guess that's not just right wing. Even Kamala Harris has come out to say she is against the violent protests.
Do we want to talk about Kamala Harris?
I mean, we can jump all over the place.
She released a statement today, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, good for Kamala. She didn't show up at she's supposed to meet with him.
She's meeting with him. She is everything she said. She's as genocidal as the rest.
Just the fact that she was like sitting and getting like her nails done instead of going to this fight, that doesn't mean that she's a good person.
And the only reason she skipped it was because she's running for president, and she figured the optics would not be good.
Anyway, so she released a statement where she she condemned the quote unquote violence. Not the violence that you're seeing here, by the way.
Not the police.
Not when police shoved and pepper sprayed people who were simply marching. No, she condemned the quote unquote violence that happened outside of Union Station in Washington, D.C. And for those who don't know the geography, Union Station is a train station that's roughly, I don't know, like a half mile away from the Capitol building.
It's very close.
It's very close. How is that on my distance?
Quarter mile.
Whatever. I didn't say like 10. Okay?
Good thing you didn't say 10 miles.
So it's very close to the Capitol building. And so the march was started outside of the Capitol building as close as you could get because they put up hella barricades. Almost like it's a police state.
Oh yeah. Fun fact. They spent way more on protecting, quote unquote, the Capitol and everything for Netanyahu's visit than they did for the NATO summit, 2 weeks ago, that had something like 32 heads of state from around the world here. Way more on Netanyahu.
Well, because people tend to hate genociders more than... I mean, the people who were at NATO, they support the genocide.
They do love a genocide.
They're not actively creating it. So I'm not letting them off the hook. But anyway, so basically, Kamala Harris condemned the quote unquote, and I'm saying quote unquote violence because, first of all, burning a U.S. flag is protected by the First Amendment. And there's been court cases about this. It is protected speech to burn an American flag. Look it up. And then burn a flag.
Actually, protected speech. So that's not violence.
So that's not violence. If it also wasn't protected speech, it still wouldn't be violence because it's a fucking flag, okay? Violence is something that you do to living things. So, for instance, if one were to, not that I condone that, if one were to mess up pipeline equipment, for instance, that's property destruction, and that's different than violence. And actually, legally speaking, it is as well. So violence does not mean taking down a flag and then burning it. It does not mean hoisting a different flag, which is what they did. They hoisted Palestinian flags over Union Station, which I love. And then they burned in effigy a giant puppet of Netanyahu. Also not violence because puppets aren't real. Maybe they didn't realize that puppets aren't people.
Because puppets aren't real.
I don't know if they know. Maybe they think that like the little dolls that they have in their closet are real. There's like a Chucky issue. I don't know.
So here's the thing: is it barely looked like Netanyahu. If it had just looked slightly like, if they were like, we think it was Netanyahu, then is it violence? If it's just a random face?
Like if it was just a shitty,
it's like we don't know.
If it looked like your 8th grade math teacher,
it could have been violence. If just they'd gotten the eyes right, it's the dumbest. These are children. These are genocidal children, is what they are.
So she condemned that violence. But nowhere did she condemn the violence by the cops. Funny how a cop wouldn't condemn that violence, huh? Nowhere did she condemn the violence of the cops against protesters. Nowhere did she condemn, the violence of an ongoing genocide where children's bodies are literally ripped into shreds of fabric and gore. She did not condemn the violence. Let's go through a little list here. How about the fact that in her old state of California, the governor, Gavin Newsom, just announced that he would like California officials to start homeless encampment sweeps. That's some 180,000 unhoused people that are about to be violently removed to where? I don't know. But
they can't sleep in private, can't sleep in public. What's that leave?
She's not going to condemn that violence. So again, this tells you everything that you need to know about Kamala Harris. And if you still think it's a good idea to vote for her, again, I have nothing nice to say to you, so I'm just going to keep it to myself because you know what I would say anyway. And this is like, and there's video here that we can.
So yeah, let's get into some of the video. I showed you the video. It was just playing of cops pepper spraying protesters. The pepper spray, as you know, is a chemical weapon. Now, chemical weapons are illegal for international use, but luckily, loophole, you can use them on your own people. So chemical weapons used on your own people, perfectly cool. And then here is some more video of the protest yesterday. This is, I don't know which block this is, but, and by the way, they succeeded at delaying Netanyahu from his speech on time, succeeded in making it very difficult for a lot of the lawmakers to operate around DC. Obviously succeeded in getting media attention as well. And yeah, a lot of kind of achievements for activism and protest.
And you can show the other video of them raising the Palestinian flag at Union Station.
Yeah.
I think it's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so here they are switching the Palestine to the flag of Palestinian, and
again, not violent, raising a flag.
And increasingly, you're seeing. Earlier I said right-wing media, and I really want to correct myself. It's really been all the media will show things like this. At Columbia, they did the same thing. They took down the American flag and put up a Palestinian one, and the cops were calling it violence. The media is calling it violence. They love to point to a flag being replaced as if that is some sort of, attack on human beings. Bullshit. This is what fascism does. It tries to destroy speech and freedom of speech, and it tries to lock up activists and those who expose the reality of the empire.
Yeah, and again, like, there's the tired trope of raising the Palestinian flag as anti-Semitism. Myself and a shit ton of other Jews were out there yesterday. And even if we hadn't been there, raising a Palestinian flag is not anti-Semitism. Please just shut the F up about that. It is absolute horseshit. And if you knew anything, then you'd realize that actually the state of Israel is anti-Semitic. Not just in the literal sense that Palestinians are Semites too, but in the sense that the existence of the apartheid nation state of Israel is a danger to Jews around the world.
And yeah, there's, we've discussed it a lot, so we won't belabor the point, but there's this, it just continues, this trying to call everything anti-Semitism, call those of us who call out Israel for perpetrating a genocide, oh, that's anti-Semitic, even though we're Jews, it doesn't matter, oh, still anti-Semitic. Anything that's critical of Israel, anti-Semitic. Elon Musk tweeted out yesterday that he said it's becoming increasingly clear that the Democrats are anti-Semitic, which, what?
I mean, yes, if you admit that there are evangelicals among their ranks too who want all the Jews to be in Israel so that that then will be eaten by the violent flames of the underworld, then yes. But not if you mean that. Yeah. So this was, and this was just like a part of the protest that happened yesterday. And I think it's important to note that, like, some people who were part of these protests or are also on the left are just coming out and being like, hey, y'all, we shouldn't have done this, because this is what everyone's focusing on. I got news for you.
They're going to focus on...
It doesn't matter what you do. Yeah. Because I was a part of groups, these little affinity groups that blocked traffic to try and basically gum up the works so that he was late, and he was. And just to make it clear that we hate him. And then if that would have been the only thing that happened, guess what the headline would have read? Like, anti-Semites block traffic and keep people from getting to their hard-earned jobs, because they hate Jews or something. It's like, it doesn't matter what you do. you are going to get shat on by corporate media and the establishment regardless. So it's like, and I'm not saying like, oh, great, so then we should just shoot cops.
Just
like
do
not
everything.
I'm not saying like, let's make it like the Weather Underground here necessarily. What I'm saying is that like our tactics should not focus on whether the media likes us or not. Our tactics should focus on, is this a good tactic based on what our goal is? Like, for instance, to block traffic, to make him late, to keep him from getting from where he's going. Does this tactic make sense for the proposed goal of just making his visit miserable? It's like, let's look at what our goals are, and the goal should never be so that corporate media likes you, because they're never going to like you.
And as you said, one of the other images and video that's been widely circulated by the media and maybe more right-wingers, but is during these protests at Union Station. There's a giant statue of Columbus. Now, it's appropriate because we're a genocidal nation, have a genocidist, is it? A genociderist up on a statue.
It's the District of Columbia.
Yeah. So the giant statue there, and someone jumped up there and spray painted Hamas on the side of it. Now, as you pointed out, this is almost definitely an infiltrator, because if you talk to any of the people at these protests, Hamas is not the number one word out of their mouth. They say free Palestine. They say this is a genocide. They say Israel is a fascist state that is killing children. They say those kind of things, mainly free Palestine, that people deserve to be free, etc. They want to stop the funding of it by the U.S. Though that's what people say. Very few people are just running around chanting Hamas. And so
like nobody actually,
so nobody.
None of the chants I can tell you that we had said anything about Hamas, because Hamas is not the point here.
So
because Hamas would not exist without the apartheid state of Israel.
So when someone does that, when someone jumps up and spray paints Hamas and runs around saying "Yay Hamas," they're almost definitely infiltrators.
A little too
mostly not necessarily government infiltrators, but just Zionists who want to co-opt the message and make it look like that this is actually a pro-Hamas rally, because that's what Netanyahu calls all of these things. That's what our media calls all of these, right? Pro-Hamas rallies. Mm-hmm. They're not. They're pro-freedom rallies. They're anti-genocide rallies. That's what they are. Thank you, Michael, for the donation.
And another thing why it just stinks a little too much is that a lot of the street art that has been put up by folks in the area that says like free Gaza or free Palestine or whatever, it's been like tagged over by Zionists, oftentimes mentions Hamas, because it's just like it's like it's like a knee-jerk reaction. Like, what? October 7th, Hamas. Like, it's just like they can't, it's like this verbal vomit that they just like have ready to go whenever you mention like genocide. So it's not a talking point of the people for Palestine. It's a talking point of the Zionists. So it just like, it's a little too perfect. And that being said, it's like, this still does not detract from the fact that the people showed up in the streets. We shut some shit down. We made it abundantly clear where the people of DC, and indeed largely the country, because people came on buses and trains from all over, mm-hmm. where the people stand on this issue. And so I like infiltrators and whatever, that shit's always going to happen, and the media is always going to twist some shit. So I think the important thing, like when we do our debriefs about actions and things like that, I think it's important to focus on, yes, what didn't go well and what we could do better, but also to focus on, did we do what we came to do? And I'd say that we did. And I think that one of the things that's powerful about these actions is that it also serves as inspiration for the next action, and connections are made. People mm-hmm. there. I met up a couple of people yesterday who were like, "This is my first time. I haven't been like in an action like this before. I've only done like little marches, but now I'm actually like blocking traffic and stuff." Like, people are finding that this is a way to escalate their engagement. And that is beautiful. Yeah. And I think that that's also an important takeaway, is that people are realizing that there's never going to be a day when Congress wakes up and goes, you know what? Fuck Israel. That's not going to happen. So we, the people, have to make it politically untenable to support Israel. And if you look at the history of the US, again, the importance of history, as James Baldwin said, the history is not past. We have to recognize that nothing in the US, like nothing positive that's ever happened in US history has happened because politicians decided that it was time to do justice. It happened because it came from the streets. It came from people demanding it to a point where it was politically untenable to do anything other than that.
Let me just real quick say thank you to Carlos for the donation. And yes, I thank you for the kind words. He says, we have infinite power of love on our side. We can do it. And yeah, it is. I mean, in the midst of this horror show, to see these protests and to see all these people uniting for these protests, you know, making the time and the effort to be a part of them in all the ways they can, all the people forwarding and sharing the messages of these protests, even though it is suppressed. I mean, this video alone right now that you're watching has half the live viewers or maybe a third of the live viewers we would normally get, likely because of the topic. So thank you so much for your support and for the support of these protests. Also, I don't know your name, but someone with the name Free Palestine on Twitter says, can we donate on Twitter? I do not have any way to donate on Twitter, but there are ways that are not YouTube or Rumble. If you want to, you can donate at linktree.com/Lee Camp is another way to do it. Thank you, Didoria, for the donation. Really appreciate it. And again, you guys keep this show going despite all the suppression, despite all the censorship. And now I want to get to our favorite. Oh, and Musical Blue Wolf for the donation. Now I want to get to, I'll say my favorite, one of my favorite protests. I mean, there were so many good ones.
I know. I showed this to you. I love this so much.
I saw it other places too.
I sent it to you first.
Eleanor always wants credit for everything.
I do want credit for the things that I do. Yes, I do.
This was in the Watergate Hotel. This was the scene in the Watergate Hotel where Netanyahu was staying. I think he's since been moved. And it's tough to tell maybe in the video, but they dumped maggots.
They do a close up.
They dumped maggots all over the table in the banquet hall. Not in this video. They don't.
Oh.
In all over the banquet hall, all over the tables that were set up for meetings. Truly incredible protest. They also released something like thousands of crickets so that it would be annoying while these people tried to sleep.
Here, I'll send you this one because this one has the close up.
Send me that one. And if we're done talking about maggots by that point, you guys will just
done.
hold on. You guys will just have to know that that's what those maggots refer to, as opposed to our politicians, which is also a reason I might show video of maggots. Thank you, Dan. Goddamn right.
It was a symbolically and tactically beautiful action. And so to whoever came up with it and whoever executed it, chef's kiss to you. I sent it to you.
Okay, I'm working on it. Well, now you got to fill time. Go. Not dancing. Talk. You realize everyone on the podcast, they just heard some clicking noises.
Yeah, I was snapping. Yeah, no, this was these are the kind of like creative actions that I think are just so beautiful. It's like the goal was to create maximum chaos. So if you scroll back, you'll get a close.
It'll loop. It'll loop.
Oh well. So here are
I'm glad they found that many crickets that were willing to support the Palestinian cause. Oh yeah, they also put red paint and stuff everywhere, right?
Crickets. Well, I think that's just the.
Oh, that was just the carpet?
Oh, might be. They put a bunch of red paint in all of the
Oh, I have that next.
In all of the fountains in DC. Yeah.
You're jumping. Sorry. You're jumping the gun. They also put red paint in the fountains in DC, folks. Here's, I guess, a little. There we go. There's a little bit of video of the red, turning the fountains to red in DC. Again, all these are just like creative tactics, cool tactics. I mean, impressive tactics to deal with cops that think they know everything that's going to happen, think they can stop everything that's going to go on. This is another one of the fountains in DC, completely red, looking like blood.
Well, and yeah, somebody wrote very 10 Commandments. It is. And And I think that that's the thing. It's like the goal was to basically create maximum chaos for the powers that be. Because I think another thing that's important to recognize about doing actions is that we have to be realistic. We were never going to stop Netanyahu from coming. We were there's a certain appreciation for what we can do. And so once we can be in the space of like the mental space of what we can do, we come up with these great ideas because we're not trying to do these lofty things like stopping his plane from landing or whatever. It's like we recognize what we have the power to do in the moment. And these kind of actions are beautiful. They're a beautiful representation of that.
Yeah, I think that's true. And a lot of these will get attention. They'll wake people up. They'll perhaps make creative people think I could come up with cool shit to do. Here is the projection on the side of the Watergate Hotel, which says wanted, and it's a photo of Netanyahu, and it says arrest for war crimes.
And there were noise demos outside of the Watergate each night. Oh, and they also, something the people who put the crickets in there also did was pulled all the fire alarms. So dude did not sleep well at the Watergate.
Well, they ended up, what I heard, they ended up moving him. So
I'm sure they did. But at least like the first night or two, he was at the Watergate and obviously did not sleep well.
And here is Jewish Voice for Peace. They're always doing great work. They were inside the Capitol. I don't know how you get inside.
Hundreds of people. Well, it's a public building.
No, I know it is, but they had it all shut down for Netanyahu.
Well, but this was the day before.
There you go.
So this was not the day of his speech.
There's your answer.
This was the afternoon before, and as I understand it, I think the majority of people were released from jail the same day, like about 10 p.m. or so. Because I think the Capitol Police were like, we better empty this out for the people coming tomorrow. But this was another beautiful example of holding space, and I'd say a mandate, if you're Jewish, is to be out here speaking up for Palestine. So I think it's really important, and these are beautiful actions that Jewish Voice for Peace is putting together and organizing.
And this is where you feel that America, and I don't mean the nation because I'm opposed to nation states, but the people within America have a heart and a soul, and like this is where it's at. It's all the people involved in these protests and getting these points out there. It's not in those fucking shills, pathetic courtesans applauding a genocidal maniac in the halls of power. It's the opposite. It's those outside the building, those not allowed in, who are actually fighting against genocide. That's what I feel is worth fighting for in this country, not the shit they're putting forward, the policies, shipping every 36 hours, shipping bombs to rain down on children. I mean, it's tough to even imagine the amount of death and destruction and devastation that these lunatics are a part of. It really can't be over exaggerated. It's just horrific. Here's, I think I have one or two more. This is from, because I also always like to make the point that there isn't Orthodox Jews that are very opposed to this. Here, this is, I'm not going to play the clip because I can't watch that man, but Netanyahu saying that Israel's the Jewish homeland, and it's been ours forever, etc. And this is their account on Twitter is called Torah Jews. I've interacted with them a little on Twitter, and they are Orthodox Jews. In this group is in New York, but that's not the only group. But and they tweeted out, Netanyahu, you have nothing, absolutely nothing with our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Nor should you utter the holy names of our kings, David and Solomon, from your defiled mouth. Our Torah forbids us to exercise any effort to regain the Holy Land in exile. You make fun of our religion, you distort our beliefs, and you endanger the Jewish people. You are a criminal indeed. Mm-hmm. That's Orthodox Jews. That's not even the crazy long hairs you're watching right here. I mean, they do have long hair, but that's unrelated. These are like the dudes with the payas and the yarmulkes and the Jewy Jews. So. And that's what they have to say.
I mean, there's a lot of Orthodox Jews that are against Israel, and while I don't agree with them on a lot of things, in particular, their
I don't even agree with them on religion, but
well,
still.
no, but I meant like how they see women and things like that. Gets a little icky on some topics, but I think that this is one of those examples of like, hey, we disagree on a lot. We can still agree that this is not okay. And I think right now, especially with this extreme splintering happening in the Jewish community, it's important to uplift the voices of all Jews who are anti-Zionist, from the Orthodox to the whatever you'd call what we are. We're not Reform. We're
secular.
Secular. But I don't like that either, because I'm like into the Jew-witchy stuff, like whatever.
We'll do it. We'll have to do a special episode on what the hell that means later. But yes, I
means
agree.
Like dancing naked beneath a full moon, Lee. That's basically what it means.
I'm down with that, as long as we don't have to wear cult shoes. They always have to. You always have to wear the same shoes if you're in a cult. Did you know that?
I think that's like white supremacist.
I can't do it. Orthopedic inserts. I just can't.
I wear inserts too.
Okay, so now that was a lot of the good news in terms of the protest, but here is some not so good news. This is being reported following Netanyahu's DC meetings. Washington has given Netanyahu the full backing to expand the war on Lebanon. Former Israeli intelligence and security official Yuval Malka told Hebrew media on July 25th that Washington has greenlit a wider war on Lebanon. So far, it's just been kind of these tit-for-tat things that are not, that influential. It's had some impact, but it's certainly not a full-scale war. According to the information I received from the delegation and what I know, Netanyahu has received full legitimacy in the United States to wage a war in Lebanon. And of course, he needs the U.S. okay, because the U.S. is going to be the one shipping him the missiles. So he had to get that okay.
I'm also wondering, are they going to give him soldiers? Because
I imagine the U.S. is not yet going to agree to boots on the ground, but, they get around that by doing a lot of other things.
I know, but that's been a conversation for quite some time now. So
he also added the Israeli army is sending a signal to the government. We are at the height of preparations for war in the north, and now is the right time. And as I've covered before, there's many analysts and things who have said this, that Netanyahu needs wider war. He needs to drag the U.S. into wider war in order to not end up in prison, or at least to remain prime minister. So it's basically, it's an existential threat to him to not get more war, which he very much wants. I mean, hell, they knew October 7th was going to happen. Even the New York Times has reported that for upwards of a year beforehand, and they intentionally did nothing. They did nothing once it was happening. Incredibly slow response times, despite knowing the exact plans,
Right, and this is something that I spoke with Mohammed Abu Hashem about, because he said that Israel had actually trained with. Just once again shows you what bullshit NATO being the North Atlantic is.
Thank you, Philip.
Israel had actually trained with NATO and, of course, the U.S. in military readiness back in either 2022 or early 2023, talking about how, hey, Swedish crowns.
Thank you, Eva.
Yeah, and if anybody's watching this from Sweden, there's a week of rage happening right now in Sweden with regards to
because Palestine. They ran out of herring. Oh,
that's cute. That's cute. So where was I? Your dumb shittery.
That wasn't
derailed me.
No, you were talking about Swedish crowns. That was on you.
Is it my fault that person was really nice and decided to donate to your
I'm just saying you chose to interrupt your own thought pattern.
Nope, it's gone.
Oh, about you were talking with a former soldier about
right.
Israel
military readiness, and he said that basically you train so that you can get aircraft, and that's aircraft. These are huge aircraft that take a lot to get ready, like fueling and all of this shit. He's like, you can get them ready to go up in 15 minutes, and he was saying that why did it take
Oh my God.
like 10 hours?
Forever.
That's ridiculous. There's no reason that it should take that long unless you're purposefully sitting
Right.
back and watching this shit go down.
Israel wanted this. They also, many people have been reporting, they've been funding and furthering Hamas for years. So just on every level, we know that Israel, and I don't mean all of Israel, but I mean at least a small group in the top of the government wanted this to happen so that they could commit this genocide. That also explains why they have no interest in getting the hostages, because it was never about the hostages. It's about ethnic cleansing. It's about completely razing Gaza to the ground. And of course, they're doing that. And they've also said that even if Hamas said, we'll give back all the hostages immediately, they would not stop the ethnic cleansing. So, and this is about this next story is about how this is all pushing towards a wider war globally. Many countries are now involved in this in one way or another, some of them supporting Israel, some of them against Israel. But now even Russia has said, this is from Russia's foreign minister Lavrov, quote, Israel, not Iran, is interested in escalation, meaning between Israel and Iran, escalation. I cannot make this any more clear. Russia will not remain an observer and will take its responsibilities. Look at Syria as an example. Most of you know that the U.S. helped create the catastrophic war in Syria, and Syria invited Russian troops and forces into Syria. And that is why there's still some Syria remaining, is because Russia got involved. But yeah, so it's pushing towards a Russia versus Israel war, a Russia versus the U.S. war, along with, of course, the proxy war in Ukraine. It's all
funny because there are a
horrifying.
lot of Russian Jews that immigrated to Israel and now pretend to have been in Israel since the dawn of time.
Since the dawn of time, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, Netanyahu's Polish. His real last name is like very Polish. He changed it to make it sound Middle Eastern.
His last name
is
very Polish. That is a crazy.
You didn't know that?
That is a crazy Polish name.
Okay.
It was a joke, but yes, I know he changed his name. He actually changed his name multiple times. He did it. He did one that was close to Netanyahu, but sounded a little more American when he was in the United States.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And then he switched it again to Netanyahu. Yeah, it's been like multiple name changes. He also he basically was raised in Pennsylvania. Like,
oh, that's right.
He spent a lot of time in the United States.
Can't find it.
Anyway, point is, dude be lying.
Milikowski.
Yeah, Milikowski.
That shit is not Palestinian, my friend. That is Polish. And that's like, you're Polish. Be Polish. Be proud to be Polish.
Yeah.
It's cool to be Polish.
Be proud to be from Pennsylvania, asshole. All right, so moving on, but on the same topic. China has the nerve. Oh, we have another new member. Philip, thank you for becoming a member. And also, if you want to become a member of my locals community, where I do extra segments, where you get extra stuff all the time, such as my ebook and my comedy special, that is at leecamp.net. That will forward you there, and scroll down to become a subscriber. And that will you'll support the show at 38 cents an episode. A whopping, I was gonna say a cup of coffee, but that's about 1/10 of a cup of coffee nowadays.
Depends on if you like, if you get fancy with it, then yeah. If you want like the cappuccino with like the little pumps of lavender or whatever the fuck, then
It's like 10 cents a pump.
That's what it is at the truck stop too.
Saw that coming.
That's also
what they said at the truck stop.
Hey.
Here we go. All right, this is the show, folks. Giggity giggity doo. The China. Sorry, I said the, and then I said China. I didn't mean to say the China. China.
The China.
The China. Be complete. Doing the peace thing. China keeps perpetrating brutal peace around the world. The latest is, and it's very upsetting. I mean, while the United States has, trying to create war, trying to create death and destruction, trying to further this genocide, China has just been an asshole with shoving this peace thing in our face. It's really obnoxious. And The Guardian is reporting that Palestinian and many others are reporting Palestinian factions, including Hamas, agree to form a future unity government. And they agreed to this in China, with China as the mediator. You can see and this includes 14 states, I think, that were involved in these negotiations. 14 Palestinian factions. Leaders from Hamas, Fatah, and other Palestinian factions have agreed after 3 days of talks in Beijing to form a national unity government at an unspecified point in the future, in a move that has bolstered China's status as a global mediator, particularly in the Middle East. The Beijing Declaration, it's being called, signed by 14 Palestinian factions, also represents a significant step forward in negotiating between these groups.
Lest we forget, China recently, with the help of Brazil, I believe, Lula created a peace deal for Ukraine and Russia, which, of course, the U.S. and Europe flatly ignored and did not agree to. But China has been trying to broker peace across the U.S. imperial reach for quite some time. And of course, the U.S. wants to pretend that it's not happening. And of course, you're not going to see any corporate media outlets talking about how China is trying to push for peace in the midst of the U.S. empire's colonial war and thanks to Israel. But yeah, it's...
And so the reaction of the U.S. and others has been to go, well, it's not going to happen anyway. And it's like, well, first of all, shouldn't you fucking try? Shouldn't you try to create peace around this world? Shouldn't that be step one? But on top of that, one of the main reasons it can't happen right now is because there's genocide in Gaza. Like, if the people of Gaza had a functioning society and not bombs raining down, maybe they could have a new vote. But of course, that can't happen when you're obliterating the society and ethnic cleansing everybody. It's just so pathetic to be like, we shouldn't even try for peace. Shouldn't even have agreements. Agreements are just so wrong.
Well, it's the same thing. Like the U.S. held some kind of it was called a peace summit with regards to Ukraine, but Russia wasn't invited.
Yeah.
So how the hell can you have a peace summit when both sides are not at the table? Like, that's not how that works. And the U.S. is well aware. Again, like going back to a previous point, the U.S. knows this. Like, the politicians, the diplomat, whatever, they are well aware of this. And they just want to create the illusion that they are, doing all they can for to end the war in Ukraine. They're doing all they can to minimize civilian casualties in Gaza when it's U.S.-made bombs raining down on them. It's like and they think that we're stupid. And if we continue to prove them right, like if we continue to accept this shit and not like stand up and show up in the streets, then they win.
Wow, big donation from SA Max Legend, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the donation and for keeping this show running. And SA Max Legend says Milkowski's speech was verbal diarrhea.
Doesn't it sound like when you say Milkowski's speech, it's
Milikowski.
It sounds like, somebody running for like 8th grade, hall monitor or something,
Yeah, it does. And yeah, I mean, it's, by the way, it's just all, I read a little bit of the speech. I didn't watch it, but it's just all the same bullshit propaganda we've seen so many times. Anyone who dares criticize Israel is anti-Semitic. And just let us do genocide, or you're anti-Semitic. The protesters outside are paid by Iran.
Where do I send my invoice?
Yeah,
is what I want to know. Do I just send it?
I mean, and here I am doing Free Palestine media every day. Why? Where's my checks? Where, Iran? Come on. I want checks. It's just so
also apparently
stupid.
China owes me money because I've been accused of being
a Chinese agent.
Yeah. So just tell me where to send the invoice, guys.
And here is a possible good news updates, although it'll be interesting to see if it actually happens, I guess, or is just, movements in that direction. But The UK is leaning towards dropping an objection to the ICC arrest warrant for Netanyahu. The UK's new Labour government faces a key test of its foreign policy towards Gaza ahead of a deadline for potential legal challenge against arrest warrants by the ICC. And it seems that they're signaling that they are not going to object to the ICC having an arrest warrant out for Netanyahu. This does not mean, by the way, that the UK and Keir Starmer and all these repulsive pieces of shit, it does not mean they're good people. It does not mean they're for a free Palestine. They still are supporting this genocide, but maybe they're hedging their bets.
Well, and it said that the article I was looking at with Middle East Eye said that they would consider, by the way, they would consider to restrict arms sales, but not suspend sales entirely. And their response was basically like, that given the attacks by the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas on Israel, it would not be right to have a blanket ban between our countries. He's talking about a ban on arms sales, but that they would try to look at specific offensive weapons that Israel could use in Gaza as part of the review. So again, like, nobody's saying that the UK, because the UK, if it were actually good, would be like, go away. Like, I hope Israel as an entity dies. Like, this is, we're stopping everything. And if Netanyahu gets anywhere close to here, we're arresting his ass. And he's gonna have Assange's cell in Belmarsh. That would be what they would do if they actually had any kind of moral and ethical authority. But again, like, hedging their bets, they're trying to be like, well, so like, I get, maybe like the bombs that are specifically targeted for children will not sell as many of those, and maybe we'll drop that objection to the ICC, but we're not going to like actively go after him or anything. It's like, it's very Democrat. It's very like, I want to do both of those things. Of course, the Democrats would never even say this much, but.
And yeah, I mean, it could very much end up being like the Biden administration's hold on the shipment of missiles to Israel, pause, which the pause, like, literally later when the White House was asked about it, she goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. There was one shipment. They send a shipment every 36 hours. There was one shipment that had been paused of 2,000-pound bombs because the Biden administration said it wasn't necessary. Meanwhile, they were sending other 2,000-pound bombs. Mm-hmm. So it's like they want both sides. They want to be able to say, hey, we're not for genocide, but also we support everything Israel does. Well, that's interesting. You're not for genocide, but you support everything Israel does because Israel's doing genocide. Like, it's just really speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Okay, I got one or two more stories, but since this is the topic of the day, so even the New York Times is reporting that all those campus protests across the U.S. where there were over 3,100 arrests of U.S. students for freedom of speech, for the crime of freedom, and some faculty, for the crime of freedom of speech, almost all those charges have been dropped, which the New York Times doesn't want to say this part means the arrests were fucking illegal. Like, that was good timing.
I have my moments.
It says more than 3,100 people have been arrested or detained. Most were charged with trespassing or disturbing the peace. Some face more serious charges like resisting arrest. But in the months since, many of the charges have been dropped, even as students are facing additional consequences like barred from their campuses or having their diplomas withheld. So basically, these arrests were illegal. They are now proving illegal. The cops and the prosecutors, et cetera, are realizing they're illegal and that they're going to get thrown out anyway by a judge. And so many of them are dropping them. And then the colleges or the universities, because they still want to have some kind of ramification for daring to stand up against genocide, for daring to say your university shouldn't be investing in this genocide, investing in Israel to commit this genocide. They still want ramifications, so they're taking their diplomas and things like that.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised to see some legal action on that as well, if students get together and take legal action. But this is an interesting, the way that the New York Times is like really like their angle on this. If you look at the map and there's a little a graph here.
Oh.
Their angle is private versus public schools, which, okay, that's interesting and a kind of like, oh, okay, but it's not actually pertinent.
It doesn't seem to matter.
It doesn't matter at all. It does not matter at all with regards to the storyline being that these charges were dropped. So these graphs, this is another media literacy moment, folks. Anytime there's a graph, people automatically think that this is some important shit and some statistical shit that you need to know.
If there's colors in bar graphs.
There's colors in bar graphs because we're programmed that way, right?
Yeah.
Because we grow up thinking like, oh, look at the graph and here's the X, Y axis. Oh, wow, that's a lot of public. Like, who gives a shit? It's not pertinent to this story at all. And yet, with the help of these, it's like Netanyahu, with the help of a visual aid, it makes it look.
Here's a graph of how many of those students arrested had facial hair.
Right, like it's like
a pie chart.
What are we talking about? And so they completely blow past important information like, which would suggest that these arrests were totally legal and it's totally fakakt that these schools are trying to withhold their diplomas. No, none of that. It's just like, isn't it fascinating that some of these schools are public and some of them are private? That's interesting. And then, no, it's not. It's not actually at all. And this is yet another example of how the New York Times and other like legacy media like this will either bury the lead or not talk about the most important aspect of a story.
Which is,
and instead try to get you to focus on something that is totally irrelevant. Like, who's going to be reading this and later sitting at the bar being like, did you know that there were 470? No one's going to be fucking doing that.
Yeah, and it covers up the fact that these are fucking illegal arrests. This is universities, some public, some private, that got the police, which are supposedly public, to arrest students for peaceful protest. Like, that's the story. 3,100 illegal arrests across the country. That's the story. That should be the headline. That should be your fucking bar graph.
I mean, the only reason that would be pertinent is if like you then launch into a commentary about like how both public and private universities are way too expensive, and that the private universities you're more likely to have, like the legacy students that are just there because, they're the child of another student who went there or some shit like that. If you're going to launch into that conversation, fine. Also, though, it's not pertinent to this specific topic.
Okay, last story here is about Facebook censorship, which I know my Facebook has been obliterated since 2016, but this is a more recent policy of censorship. Meta's policy on Zionism has been revealed, and of course there's immense ties between Facebook. Does he have that haircut? Because he's a robot.
It's very cyborg.
And there's immense ties between Israel and Facebook, but it was announced that the social media giant Meta would broaden the scope of its censorship and suppression of content related to the Gaza genocide. Under the new policy, Facebook and Instagram posts containing derogatory or threatening references to Zionists in cases where the term is used to refer to Jews or Israelis, which in their opinion is all of the time, which is incorrect. But unsurprisingly, a welter of Zionist lobby organizations, many of which aggressively lobbied Meta to adopt these changes, cheered the move. Emboldened, the same entities are now calling for all social media platforms to follow suit. Basically, they're trying to make it impossible to say the word Zionist, which has a very clear definition. It is people that support the existence of a Jewish, of an ethno-state, Israel, and as we mentioned kind of endlessly, there's more Christian Zionists in America than there are Jews in the world. So it's, when you say Zionist, you do not just mean Jews. Now, some idiots do, but that's not what you mean if you're educated on this topic. The Times of Israel noted that nearly 150 advocacy groups and experts provided input that led to Meta's policy update. But of course, what this really does is it means that you and I can't post articles about that reference Zionism, that reference Zionists, can't talk about the harm that Zionists are doing by supporting genocide. All of those things get censored. Now, luckily, I've been censored since 2016, so this doesn't matter much to me because about 12 people out of my 330,000 followers see each post. So this probably won't change my stuff, but it could change it for a lot of people around this globe who are trying to talk about what Israel's doing.
Yeah, which is just the latest in a long string of censorship. I mean, you've probably seen online that people will use the watermelon instead of posting the actual
Yeah.
word Palestine. They'll spell Palestine with an at symbol. It's really disgusting to see this kind of censorship. It's also not surprising, and it's of course just like with there's like a spectrum of censorship, right? You have the extreme censorship where Israel is specifically targeting journalists, like actually with targeted killings, because as has been pointed out before, every time a journalist is killed in that manner, a piece of the truth dies with them, and that's their goal. They want to make sure that that truth doesn't get out, and that's why journalists in Gaza are being targeted, the keepers of their stories, of their people's stories. And this is, on further along the spectrum, you see this kind of censorship where we're not allowed to use words like Palestine. Palestine isn't allowed to exist, right? Because if it does, then that completely breaks apart the concept of Israel and it being, having always been there and that bullshit. So it's really grotesque, and it's important that we continue not only to share with each other these news reports about what's really going on, but also ensuring that our community members, our family, our friends, whatever, that we share with them the outlets that are telling the truth, like Electronic Intifada, like Mint Press News, like Project Censored, like Lee's work, like Abby Martin, the Gray Zone. It's really important. Sheer Post. I could go on, but it's really important that we continue to share the people and the stories that are actually talking about this, and not just like keeping it to ourselves in our own little echo chambers, because they're trying very hard to ensure that this information does not move forward.
Well said, and I think we're going to wrap up here. Thank you guys for supporting this show and making it possible despite all the censorship. If you'd like to give your sites to everyone.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I do a lot of work with Project Censored, and you can check out the recent episodes there at projectcensored.org. All of my work is also at artkillingapathy.com. If anybody happens to be in Baltimore this weekend, July 27th, I'll be performing some music and spoken word at a really wonderful fundraiser for the 411 Collective that is doing powerful work connecting the issues of Palestine and the militarized border between the U.S. and Mexico. You can find out more about that. I've posted about it on my Instagram at Radical Eleanor.
Radical Eleanor on Instagram. All of my stuff is at leecamp.net. That's the site where you can support this show and all my work. Also, everything's at Linktree, linktree.com/leecamp. You can find all kinds of stuff, my books, my podcasts, all that good stuff. And I've also been building up the playlists on YouTube. So if you want to go to youtube.com/moment of clarity, you can click playlists, and there's a comedy playlist. There's a playlist of me destroying idiot goons like Bill Maher and Rachel Maddow and Ben Shapiro. And anyway, so you can look at the playlist and check those out. I think you'll like those. I'm also on patreon.com/leecamp. And I will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I do these 4 days a week. And what's the other thing? Oh, I'm half-heartedly looking for a part-time producer, someone half-heartedly, someone who can help out. If you have experience in that, and I'm preferably looking for someone in the Baltimore, D.C. area, email me at leecampmail, MAIL, @gmail.com. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, and keep fighting. Thank you, Muhammad, for the donations and for keeping this show rolling. Keep fighting, everybody.